Hello, my name is Robert. I'm in the studio today with a wonderful guest. Her name is Kristen Mennona. Now, Kristen is an author, speaker, and the founder of Nurture Family Counseling, located in Denver, Colorado. Her practice specializes in the treatment of anxiety, OCD, grief and eating disorders. Her mantra, very simply, it's nurture what matters. Kristen's a licensed professional counselor, a board-certified dance movement therapist, a certified eating disorder specialist, a registered RYT 200 yoga instructor, and a BTTI trained clinician for OCD. She combines best clinical practices with ancient embodied experiences for her clients. She believes in the inherent wisdom of the body to bring forth that which needs healing. She specializes in helping clients tolerate and befriend uncomfortable situations and emotions in the body. And she hosts an Instagram page, of course, called The Body As, to inspire more people to work on body image acceptance and to pass that acceptance on to the next generation. I'm extremely honored to have Kristen in the studio with us today. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. We're happy to have you. And before we get started, I know I've kind of maybe stolen a little bit of your thunder by giving you that long bio intro, but why don't you share with the audience, share with me, share with the audience that's listening or watching, give us a little background on who you are, where you hail from, tell us about who you are behind all those wonderful words I just spoke of you.
Okay, well, so I have a practice, as you said, in Denver, Colorado, and it focuses on the family from anywhere from young children all the way through adulthood. And what brought me to therapy first and foremost was my own experiences when I was younger with anxiety. And what I began to notice is that when I would do things like move, go to a yoga class, play soccer, dance, that my anxiety got better. And I didn't really understand why. And so I found the field of dance and movement therapy, which led me to really understand the body at its most basic level. And through that work, I was able to then begin to study diagnoses and also transitions in life that we all experience from this perspective of body based work. And understanding that when we work with our body, that is our container for everything we hold. And if we can work and start from this really simple place of like, okay, I'm in my body and I'm feeling uncomfortable sensations, thoughts, emotions, feelings, and I can begin to land there first, that often opens up a journey or a pathway, if you will, for healing. And when I realized that, that was what I wanted. That's the gift I wanted to bring to the world was like, oh, I understand how the body works and how to work with it versus against it and trying to control it. So that's actually what brought me to grief work as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you find that in the work that you do that there is this? Are people aware that just to how much the body, the physical body, is connected to the mind, or is that something that they have to come to? I don't say come to terms with, but they learn as they go through any one of your programs.
Yeah. So, what I have found is in our culture at large, most of us have collectively forgotten about the wisdom of our bodies. Not that on an individual level or basis we don't remember that we have wisdom in our bodies, but collectively, when we get up and get ready for school or for work or all the things, all the to do list, the body's usually not on there unless it's in the
Mm,
form of exercise. And that might be to the betterment of your mental health, but it also might be because I just want to be really fit, right? And no judgment about that, just that culturally, as you know, we have somewhat forgotten about that there's this wealth of information that if we don't run from it can actually help us heal. And so
mm.
often I think we spend a lot of our busy lives chasing the next thing. And in doing so, we don't actually sit with what's already there. And so in workshops with me or intensives, the very first thing I want to help people do is notice what they're carrying when they walked into the room. Like they got there somehow. So now what's with them already? And then
Mm.
let's connect and contact that first. And if we know what that is, let's say the topic is grief. If you're bringing in grief and then you're sitting there and you're noticing that you're carrying heaviness in your body, or the back of your eyes hurt, or the back of your throat, or you feel like you're going to have tears, or you feel like there's something you need to say, but you can't say it. If you notice that, that's going to give us an inroad to figure out what needs attention and healing. And then we can work together in conjunction to create that pathway forward.
Help us understand, help me understand, help someone that's watching this for the first time, or maybe is on the fence. What is an intensive?
Yeah.
Is this like a new way to approach mental health and wellness?
So it's a yes and a no. So it's a new way or it's a modern way, right? And the reason I say it's a yes and a no is historically, we used to gather together with other people in ancient cultures past. We would gather together in times of grief or celebration. We would sit around a fire. We might share stories and talk and those sorts of things. And in our modern world, sometimes we need to go and seek out those types of experiences. Sometimes our churches or places where we do spiritual worship might have those opportunities for us, but not everybody has those opportunities in modern life. So this is new in the respect that now we're combining psychology, science, with those ancient practices to come together and land in community with others who are also seeking healing and to do this work not solo, because grief can be very lonely, can be a very isolating experience in our culture. Yeah.
What is it that you find are, the one or two elements that you look forward to most when you're facilitating an intensive? Like,
So, what I most look forward to when I'm meeting with people in community like this is the very first one we've already spoken about a little bit, which is helping somebody find their own internal wisdom. So, it's not about the wisdom, like I can study psychology, I can study grief, I can study all these topics, right? And at the end of the day, this work is not about me as the teacher. This is about me being a guide that's going to walk alongside you so that you can figure out and you can feel and navigate what needs healing inside of you. And so as we begin to identify that together with me guiding and the person deeper, like getting a deeper connection to their grief and to their process, they're going to have inherent wisdom that I will never have about what they need to do. And so that's one of the things that is the most rich and feeds me as much as it feeds the other person. And then the other one is the shared communal experience in a retreat. So in a retreat, you're in an intensive space. In other words, we're doing a deep dive into a topic in community with other people who are also seeking and doing a deep dive. And so it creates this really safe container for sharing something you wouldn't normally share in your everyday life, especially because you go outside of your everyday life literally. Like we're going out into nature to be more connected and communal, like and connected to like natural things such as like sunshine and rivers and those sorts of things. And then we're doing that in conjunction with other people who want to heal and who are interested in understanding themselves and their journey better. So the two things I look the most forward to is helping somebody land in their own wisdom and then helping them begin to do this in a safe community and a safe container with other people.
let's get into the life after loss intensive. All right.
Yes.
Turning it over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So, life after loss was born out of this idea that when we lose a loved one, and I do mean lose it doesn't have to be a family member, but somebody who's close to you, was important to you. When we lose them, grief is a natural occurrence that occurs as soon as that loss happens. And that journey of grief can look so different for every individual and can last for different amounts of time. Um, and this workshop or this retreat was born out of the idea that many of us don't know exactly what's happening. Like, why do we feel what we feel? Why is our mind continuing to remember or think that the person's still there when they're not there? What's happening in our brains? What's happening that it's hard to get back out into our own lives again? Right? And there are many ways that our lives become smaller after someone dies, and that makes so much sense. So I want to make sure I really reiterate that. Like, it makes sense that we curl into ourselves and that we maybe do less or that we don't feel like being celebratory, right? Um, but at some point, there's this entryway or this timing for each of us where we might want to get back into our lives, and perhaps we feel stuck or lost or don't know how. And this workshop is for that work. It's like when you've experienced the loss and you know you're in it and you want to take a next step to see what your life could be like after that. That's what this is for. And this workshop is co-ed, so it is for anybody who has lost someone that they love. It does not matter, male, female, any of that sort of stuff for me is like, I think the more important piece is, are you seeking something now? And what is that? And let me help you.
All right. So we have another question. I think you kind of answered this already, but it's good to put it
Sure.
up on the screen for those that are watching, of course. And that is, who should attend? Again, someone that's watching this video and they're trying, again, they may be unsure as far as is this an advanced class? Is it in a beginner course? What have you? So, can you speak to specifically that? Who should attend?
So, because grief is a universal experience for all of us, and at some point in time, all of us will go through grief if we live long enough, right? We will lose someone and most likely have those feelings arise. Um, if you are anywhere in that spectrum of grief, from anticipating the loss of someone you love dearly and you're grappling with or feeling scared of or don't know how to navigate that, or you can't answer the question, how will my life go on if they pass? That's a really good entry point. Anywhere from there on to I've lost somebody or I've lost somebody and now I don't know how to move forward or go back into my life. And it's a co-ed workshop, so anybody's welcome as long as those are the types of topics that you're wanting to explore, it would be a good fit for you. And like I said, like loss of like a pet or something else would probably be better for a different workshop. But other than that, it's really this universal experience where we're exploring together what it's like to imagine losing somebody, to actually losing them, to going back into our life having lost, and living again. Yeah.
It's really great answer. So let's move on to the next one. What is it that someone that is in a situation where they're dealing with grief, dealing with a pain of a loss of a loved one, they attend the intensive. What are some of the things? What are some things that we can identify that they should be able to take away with them? What are some of the, I don't know if it's skills, if it's whatever it may be, but let's answer that question for the people that are on the fence right now. Why should I attend?
I think the very first thing I would say is to gain a deeper understanding of grief and how it functions and what it is. So, the very first thing I would want you to know is that it is a normal process, but it can feel very scary. It can feel isolating and alone. And so, many of us, when we experience those feelings, often assume that can't be right. I shouldn't probably feel this bad. So, the very first part that you will gain when you come to this workshop is an understanding of what your brain is doing in grief and what your grief is. So we will look through actual questionnaires that are research based questionnaires of understanding your particular grief, understanding the severity or how intense it is. And as we understand that picture for you, and as you understand what grief is and how it's working in your body, you're going to have so much more information to settle into your grief and get curious about it and understand better what you need to do to care for yourself in your grief. The next portion of this workshop is about caring for ourselves in our grief. So, as we learn to care for ourselves and care for the longing that we're experiencing and care for ourselves in those moments when we really miss our loved one, um, we will have actionable steps and items to do. And those will be done through art making, through writing, through sharing with others, and through being in that community as the container to hold that work. In addition to being able to meet with me and have support with me throughout the whole workshop or retreat, I mean, and finally, in the last closing parts of this retreat, we're going to look at and work on goals for your life after loss. So this idea is you've been through and are going through loss, and how do we give you tools such as creating specific goals for yourself when you return home? And they may be as simple as making sure you get out with friends, or it might be helping you start to find a grief group to go to. Whatever those actionable items are for you, that's the action plan we're going to help you put into place so that when you leave this retreat, you will have an understanding of what grief is, how it works, that it's universal, that there are steps to care for yourself, and that there are ways to go back into your life and live more fully and feel more alive again.
Though I want to go into a few what I would call rapid fire questions, and these are really just for someone that is coming into this space. They're not sure what to ask for, what to look for in terms of a clinician, someone to help them through their journey. So have you give some answers, and hopefully it'll impact or resonate with someone that's watching or listening. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah, sounds like
Okay.
fun. Okay.
First question I want to have is, how would you best define mental health?
Mm. I'm going to say it's a three-dimensional component of being, and that is mind, body, and spirit. And mental health is a way to interact with ourselves, our bodies, our hearts, what we want, and the world at large. Um, to participate in life and be a community member. So I really think mental health is about taking care of the whole person.
So then, building on that, but would you say there is or is not a difference between, let's say, sadness and depression?
Yes. So sadness is the emotion that arises in any of us in a given moment. So sadness wells up. Maybe we feel tears. We feel that pang, right? That's that present moment, like something hurt. That's sad, right? Depression is like the equivalent of a marathon for sadness. It's this ongoing slog where it's like you put on glasses that are gray and the world goes gray persistently or continually or repeatedly over time. So that it's sadness that feels very persistent, that doesn't go away easily, that not a lot of the things you do alleviate it in the same way that it might be if it were sadness about a specific thing.
Similarly to sadness and depression, how would you define or equate for someone the difference between, let's say, anxiety
Hmm.
and an anxiety disorder?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. So anxiety is actually evolutionarily something that we all inherited, and it's actually really helpful. It is part of our survival mechanism system. So I always like to joke with my clients that have anxiety that if we were cave people and they were anxious, I would want to hang out with them because their body is often scanning for danger. They might look for that like lion or tiger off in the distance and see it before those of us who are relaxed may not notice it. So having anxiety is evolutionarily beneficial for survival. Having an anxiety disorder is like having a faulty alarm system in your body. It is like when you have an alarm system set in your house and the cat goes off and trips the alarm system and the alarm bells and whistles go off and you
Mm,
think there's an emergency. Anxiety disorder is like the cat and you think the cat is like some intruder is going to get you, but it happens repeatedly. So the system keeps getting tripped over and over and over again. And if we think about it in this evolutionary perspective, really what's happening is your alarm system's going off repeatedly, often, and loudly in a disorder, anxiety disorder, which is exhausting. It's exhausting. Yeah.
wow, that is such a great visual. Phenomenal. So, taking that definition and then building on top of it, and tying it back into life after loss is grief. Typically when I think of grief, unless it's like say Charlie Brown, they say good grief Charlie Brown, but grief is usually something that's associated with, sadness. It's some sort of the trauma is more of a sad negative type of thing. So is grief a form, or can grief be a form of anxiety? Can people have anxiety that manifests itself as grief, or are they separate altogether?
I think my understanding is they can function similarly. My understanding is how they work in the body and how they land in us feel different. Anxiety feels like
Sure.
that really like tremory, like adrenaline kind of sensation, whereas grief can feel really heavy and like molasses kind of. But what I
Mhm.
would say from an evolutionary perspective, what the brain is trying to do is there are two realities in our everyday life. We have a virtual map of what's happening in our life. Like I know right now that my children are at their school. They're at school. I know they're not in danger because I have a virtual map, not because I can see them right now. But if somebody were to tell me, Kristen, your children didn't make it to school today, they're not there right now, I would pretty quickly start to go into loss and grief and be like, oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? That sort of terrifying feeling a parent might feel, right? And
Mhm.
my point in saying that is grief in and of itself is an actual learning process for the brain. The brain is trying to update the virtual map inside our mind to the reality map. So the virtual map says, this is my loved one, and they've been a part of my life my whole life, and they should always be here. And the reality map says,
Mm,
but they're gone. And the virtual map says, but I should be able to call them to tell them this funny thing that happened at work today. And the reality map says, but you can't. And so it's
mm,
a little bit different than anxiety, which is that switch that keeps
mm,
getting flipped, but it's this internal process where as it learns, it doesn't mean we don't miss or long or have the pang, but it's not as fresh where we're learning repeatedly. Like I'm setting a table and I'm putting out the food for my loved one, and wait a minute, I can't sit there. Like they're not going to be here, right?
mm,
That happens enough, and eventually our brain updates, and we don't have the same things that trip us up. We still get tripped up and have moments of grief that, pull the rug out from under you.
I've got another question here. Do you find
Yeah.
that um, grief, is there a what's the right word I'm looking for here? Is there a standard way of grieving that people have, or is grief unique to each individual? Primarily speaking, and again, I don't want to give away any spoilers for the intensive,
You're
all
good.
right? But if you think about like someone who maybe has lost a loved one recently versus someone that's lost a loved one recently, person A is bawling their eyes out. They're crying. They're really it's weighing on them heavily. The other person, they're just numb. You don't
Yeah.
really see any sort of emotion. Is one standard, and or is it just people they just react differently? How would
Yeah.
you?
So there's a few things I'm thinking about to that question. One is there is no right way for anybody to grieve. So because I like to take things back to the body and back to the brain and the mind,
Mhm.
each of us has a different physiological system. So all of our brains operate differently. It's the reason that like you and I could take, if we needed to take a medication for something, our bodies might metabolize the same medication differently, right? Because we have two different systems, even though they have the same parts and working pieces and all that sort of stuff. So everybody comes into life with their own physiology and their own way of processing things. So that's just at the get-go before any grief enters the picture. Then we have to layer the relationship that we had to the person that passed away and our own way of processing emotions, right? So this all makes it super unique. What researchers have been able to do is study, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote about the 5 stages of grief, which so many people know about. There's lots of like studies around the stages of grief, and those are descriptors that were seen commonly through the patients and clients that she studied. But what I think our pop psychology has done is sometimes taken those and made them almost seem like they're the factual steps you need to take. And those are different for everybody. Those are not the same.
So we have a few minutes left,
Sure.
and I want to take it back to the life after loss,
Yes.
intensive, and just get a couple of questions out to the to the audience, people that are watching or listening that they may have. First question I want to ask you is this: someone, let's say, already suffers with a sense of they're introverted, they're maybe shy. What
Mhm.
would you say to them as they prepare to attend the intensive, where they're going to be kind of in a group setting, so they
Oh,
get
that's a
something out of
really
it?
great question. So, if someone's introverted and they're not sure about the group setting, what I would want you to know first and foremost is that showing up is absolutely enough. As a group leader, I always give permission and encouragement that if there's something we're doing that feels public or too open for your comfort level, I'm more interested in you honoring your comfort level than I am you completing an assignment. I'm more interested in you honoring yourself than I am you feeling like you need to share something that you're not ready to share or don't want to share ever. And that I believe that witnessing others who do share is also healing, and that that is more than enough in ways of participating. And that your participation can be, it doesn't need to look like everybody else's for it to still be really meaningful. Um, so that's something I would want people to know is that you're enough just as you show up. And then that shapes that cohort. That
Hmm.
becomes part of that, and that's a really cool thing. That's what we bring when we bring diversity into a group. None of us are gonna be the same, and none of us are gonna feel the same way about being in a group like that.
What would you say to someone that they're going through a grieving process? How can someone maybe do a self appraisal to say, I need I need assistance, or I need help? Are there things that you can look for, or you can maybe give them some ideas? If you're experiencing this, you might want to consider looking into intensive. If you're considering that, or if you're going through this, you follow? Does that make am I
Yeah, I
making
think
sense?
so. So,
Okay.
I think it's like kind of let me make sure I understand your question. Almost kind of the resources, the different things that are out there that you could be doing to better understand what's happening for you and understand where you are in your process. So if you're looking at something like an intensive, what I would say is this desire to have something be drastically different is what I would say would be something you might be experiencing. In other words, if you felt stuck for a long time, or you feel like this is dragging on, or you feel like I need to have something feel like I just need like a reset button. I need something to feel different. I think an intensive is a great way to do that. And I think it's a great way to do a deep dive. If you want to dive into the depth and the material, and I don't mean the depth of depression or grief where you can't come out. I mean the richness of material around this topic. And there's a lot of richness because there's a lot of love and grief, right? So that would
Mm.
be what I would suggest for somebody who wants to do it, like, or is looking at an intensive, or that might be somebody who would really land with. In terms of somebody else who maybe isn't quite ready for that, that's absolutely understandable.
Mm.
Where I might start is there's two organizations that I really like, and I like to use as resources myself. One is called What's Your Grief? They have a really cool, accessible website. And the other is the Center for Prolonged Grief. So prolonged grief is an actual
Mm.
diagnosis when grief begins to extend and last longer, when grief becomes entrenched and stuck and your life has really been put on hold for a long time and you feel like you just can't live again for, a repeated amount of time, that sort of thing. The Center for Prolonged Grief is like who does the basic or the most critical research on that topic. And
Mm.
so they're a great resource. I would recommend reading The Grieving Brain. It's basically this is your brain on grief, is kind of what that
Wow.
book is about. It's
You're,
intense and it's like really, really intelligently written and very like you've got to like science, but it's a
mm.
really cool deep dive into the grieving brain. So those are three resources that like, and the reason I mentioned the first two websites is they both have screening tools and they have free CEs or free workshops that you can, like an hour long, that you can watch about different topics about grief. And so those are some of my go-to resources to give to people that I really like. And then individual therapy or a group in your community. Like a lot of you can look up grieving groups in your community. There's a lot of different ones.
Well, I think with that, we're going to end it there. This was amazing, Kristen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And I wish you the best with the upcoming intensive.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for having
All
me.
right. All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.